You are listening to Furious HOA Karens. This is the pettiest property line war ever. Karen stood next to my property corner yelling that the HOA owned the boundary and I was lucky she was letting me speak. "You are not going to slip past enforcement," she said, jabbing her finger at the fence panel lying flat on my grass. I stood there with a tape measure in one hand and my phone in the other, recording every word. Angela Sanchez, secretary of the Ridgeview Estates Fence Compliance Association, had just planted an orange reflective marker at my curb like I was a construction hazard, and now she was telling me I could not touch my own fence without board approval. I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado, in a neighborhood where a missing survey stake turns into a neighborhood scandal, and I work as a mortgage loan officer, so I understand exactly what happens when liens pile up. The storm 2 nights ago had knocked one panel loose, and I needed to reset it before the next weather system rolled in. Angela was standing between me and the post hole with a clipboard covered in a clear rain cover, no readable text visible. Just her smug expression and that pink visor catching the dull light. She stepped closer, blocking my view of the post. "You do not build to my standard, you pay to my standard," she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. I have done this before and people fold every time. I let her say my name loud, because later I wanted it on the recording. She did not know I had a security camera on the corner of my garage, angled perfectly to catch the property line and every move she made near that survey stake. I kept my tone calm and asked her to show me the rule that said I needed approval for a repair. She waved the clipboard like it was a court order and said the board had discussed my property at the last meeting. I had not received notice of that meeting. I had not received an agenda. She shrugged and said maybe I should check my spam folder. The fence panel was just sitting there, 8 feet long, pressure-treated wood, one end still attached to the post. I had planned to lift it, check the bracket, reset it, and be done in an hour. Angela was treating it like I had bulldozed the neighborhood. She told me the panel was a fire hazard and that if I did not move it immediately, she would file a violation notice. I pointed out that it was lying flat on my grass, not blocking any path, and that calling it a fire hazard was absurd. She said the board would decide what was absurd, not me. Then she turned and walked back toward the street, paused, and moved one of the survey stakes about 6 inches to the left. I watched her do it. I did not say anything. I just kept the phone pointed at her and let the camera on my garage do the rest. After she left, I took photos of the moved stake, measured the new position, and checked the original survey map I had ordered when I closed on the house. The stake she moved was now inside my property line by a full foot. She had just manufactured a boundary dispute to justify her enforcement threat. I called my buddy Eric, a community manager from another HOA who spots violations instantly, and sent him the photos. He called me back in 10 minutes and said Angela was setting me up for a code trap where any action I took would be wrong. If I reset the stake, she would claim I tampered with HOA property. If I left it, she would use the new position as proof I was encroaching. Eric told me to get a licensed surveyor out here before Angela filed anything official. I scheduled the surveyor for the next morning, but that night I got an email. It was sent to the entire neighborhood email list, and the subject line said compliance reminder regarding unauthorized construction. The body of the email did not name me directly, but it described my address, my fence, and my so-called refusal to follow community standards. It framed me as the one resident who refuses community standards, and it invited neighbors to report any similar violations they observed. I read it twice, checked the sender, and saw it came from Angela's personal email with the HOA signature block. She had just blasted 300 homeowners to pressure me into backing down. The next morning the surveyor arrived at 7. His name was Tom, and he carried a tripod, a laser level, and a folder of plat maps. He spent 90 minutes checking corners, comparing elevations, and documenting every stake. When he finished, he showed me the report. The original stakes were correct. The stake Angela moved was now a full 14 inches out of position, and the movement had been recent because the dirt around the base was freshly disturbed, while the other stakes had settled grass around them. Tom asked if I wanted him to reset it. I said no. Leave it exactly where it is. I need it documented as evidence. He raised an eyebrow, but nodded and added a note to his report. While Tom was packing up, Angela came back. She parked at the curb, got out, and walked straight toward us with her clipboard. Tom saw her coming and muttered that he had seen this move before. She ignored Tom and spoke directly to me. She said the board had scheduled an emergency compliance hearing for tomorrow night, and that I was required to attend. I asked if she had sent me written notice. She said the email blast counted as notice. Tom interrupted and said that was not how due process worked, and Angela snapped at him to stay out of HOA business. Tom held up his survey report and said he was a licensed professional and his measurements were public record. Angela's face went red. She said the HOA did not recognize third-party surveys without board approval. Tom packed his gear, handed me the folder, and told me to call him if I needed him to testify. After he left, I went inside and started building my evidence file. I had the survey report, the photos of the moved stake, the timestamp metadata from my security camera, and screenshots of the email blast. The camera footage was the key piece. It showed Angela approaching the stake, looking around, crouching down, and pulling it sideways. The metadata confirmed the date, time, and location. I burned it onto a thumb drive and labeled it Exhibit A. That afternoon, Angela sent another email. This one was addressed to me directly with the board copied. It said I was in violation of Section 4.7 of the CC&Rs, which governed fence height, setback, and materials. It said my repair work constituted new construction and required Architectural Review Board approval, a site plan, and a 21-day comment period. It said if I proceeded without approval, I would be fined $500 per day starting immediately. I read the CC&Rs. Section 4.7 said repairs using identical materials did not require review. I replied to the email, quoted the exact language, and said I was repairing a storm-damaged panel with the same wood, same height, same posts. Angela replied in 6 minutes. She said the board interprets the rules, not me, and that my interpretation was incorrect. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more wild HOA drama where the receipts always win. I called Eric again. He told me Angela was manipulating minutes and agendas to erase objections after the meeting, and that I needed to show up tomorrow with a paper trail so thick she could not ignore it. He also said I should bring a witness who was not afraid to speak up, because Angela would try to control the narrative and shut me down. The problem was that my best potential witness, my next-door neighbor Carol, was terrified of retaliation and refused to be seen on camera at first. Carol had watched Angela threaten 3 other homeowners over landscaping violations, and she did not want to be next. I spent 2 hours convincing her that if we did not stand up now, Angela would keep escalating until someone got hit with a lien. The hearing was set for 6:30 at the clubhouse. I arrived at 6:15 with my folder, my thumb drive, and Carol. Angela was already there, sitting at the front table with 2 other board members. The board president was out of town, so Angela was running the meeting. She had arranged the chairs in rows facing the table, lecture style, and she had a printed agenda on the table with my address as the only item. I sat in the front row. Carol sat 2 rows back. Angela started the meeting by reading a prepared statement. She said I had ignored multiple warnings, proceeded with unauthorized construction, disturbed HOA property, and created a safety hazard. She said the board had no choice but to impose immediate fines and a stop work order. I raised my hand. Angela ignored me and kept talking. She said the violation had been documented by photographic evidence and witness statements. I asked who the witnesses were. She said that was confidential. I asked if I could respond. She said I would have 3 minutes at the end. I stood up anyway and said I had a licensed survey report that proved the property line had been tampered with. Angela banged her hand on the table and said I was out of order. One of the other board members, a man named Greg, told her to let me speak. Angela glared at him, but nodded. I walked to the front, plugged the thumb drive into the laptop connected to the projector, and opened the video file. The room went silent. The footage showed Angela approaching my property line, looking over her shoulder, crouching down and pulling the survey stake. The timestamp was clear. The angle was perfect. You could see her face, her badge clip, her pink visor. I let it play twice. Then I handed Greg the survey report and said the stake she moved was now 14 inches out of position and that her enforcement action was based on a boundary line she herself had fabricated. Angela's face went white, then red. She said the video was taken without her consent and was inadmissible. Greg cut her off and said this was not a courtroom and that the video was taken on private property. He asked her directly if she moved the stake. Angela said she was inspecting HOA infrastructure. Greg asked why she did not file an inspection report. Angela did not answer. Carol stood up from the back and said she had watched Angela harass 4 homeowners in the last 6 months and that the email blast was clearly retaliation. Another resident stood up and said he had received a similar email last year after complaining about meeting minutes. Angela tried to shut the meeting down. She said the board would reconvene an executive session and issue a decision later. Greg said no, we are finishing this now. He asked me what I wanted. I said I wanted the stop work order lifted, the fine voided, a written retraction of the email blast, and a formal correction to the survey line. Greg looked at the other board member, a woman named Lisa, and she nodded. Greg said the board voted 2-1 to grant my requests. Angela said she did not vote yes. Greg said he knew. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. Angela tried to leave through the side door, but Greg called her back and asked if she wanted to make a motion for the record. She stared at him. Someone in the back laughed. That moment, watching her freeze with her clipboard and her pink visor and no way out, was the funniest thing I had seen in months. She did not make a motion. She left. The next day I received a formal email from Greg. It included a written retraction of the email blast, a voided fine notice, and a statement that the stop work order was lifted. It also said the board was initiating a review of enforcement procedures and that Angela would no longer handle compliance matters directly. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from an attorney hired by the board. The letter said the HOA recognized the license survey as accurate, that the association would restore the stake to its original position, and that Angela Sanchez was prohibited from contacting me directly regarding any property matters. I went back outside and finished the fence repair. The weather was holding, but I knew another storm system was coming through in 48 hours, and I needed the panel secured before then. I lifted the panel, checked the bracket, replaced 2 screws, and reset it against the post. The whole job took 30 minutes. While I worked, I saw someone peeking through the blinds across the street like it was a show. I did not care. I was done letting Angela control my time. That afternoon, Eric called. He said Angela had been removed from the compliance committee entirely and that the board was scheduling a special meeting to vote on new enforcement guidelines. He also said 2 other homeowners had filed formal complaints against her for similar harassment, and that the management company was reviewing all of her emails and violation notices from the past year. I asked Eric what would happen next. He said the board would probably settle quietly with anyone Angela had targeted, and that she would either resign or get voted out at the next election. He was right. 3 weeks later, the board held the special meeting. Greg presented a proposal requiring all enforcement actions to include written notice with a 10-day response period, a clear citation of the rule being enforced, and an opportunity for the homeowner to present evidence before any fine was imposed. The proposal passed unanimously. Angela was not at the meeting. She had submitted a resignation letter 2 days earlier. The board accepted it without comment. The new guidelines also required the HOA to publish standards and timelines to all homeowners, which meant no more secret interpretations or surprise fees. I got a copy of the new rules in the mail, and for the first time in 2 years I felt like I could breathe. Carol told me 3 other neighbors had thanked her for speaking up, and that people were finally talking openly about the board's behavior. But the story did not end there. A month later, I received a call from the HOA's insurance carrier. The representative said they had reviewed the complaint file and the security camera footage, and that the harassment complaints were stacking up. They said the association's liability coverage was at risk if the board did not take stronger action to prevent retaliation and abuse. The rep told me they were considering canceling the policy unless the board implemented training and oversight. That call triggered a full board audit. The management company brought in an outside consultant to review every enforcement action Angela had handled in the past 2 years. The audit found that Angela had issued 47 violation notices in 2 years, and that 32 of them were based on rules she had misinterpreted or applied inconsistently. 12 homeowners had paid fines they should not have been charged. The board voted to refund those fines in full and to send a formal apology letter to each homeowner. The total refund amount was over $18,000. The board also hired a new management company with a compliance officer who actually followed the rules. I was not done yet. I contacted an attorney and asked if I could file a claim for the time and expense Angela's harassment had cost me. The attorney said I had a strong case for intentional infliction of emotional distress and abuse of process, but that the smarter move was to demand a settlement and a formal policy change. I sent a demand letter to the board. It outlined Angela's conduct, attached the video evidence, and requested a refund of all fees I had paid during the dispute, plus compensation for the surveyor, the attorney consult, and my time. The board's attorney called me within a week. We settled for $4,000, no admission of liability, and a binding agreement that Angela would never serve on the board or any committee again. The settlement check arrived 3 weeks later. I deposited it, paid the surveyor, paid the attorney, and had enough left over to replace 2 more fence panels that were starting to rot. I did the work myself over a weekend. No one from the HOA said a word. 6 months after the hearing, the board held its annual election. Greg ran for president and won. Lisa stayed on as treasurer. 2 new members joined the board, both of them homeowners who had been targeted by Angela. The new board's first act was to publish a transparency policy requiring all meeting minutes, budgets, and enforcement logs to be posted online within 48 hours. The second act was to fire the old law firm and hire one that specialized in community association governance, not litigation. I ran into Carol at the mailboxes one morning. She told me Angela had moved out of the neighborhood entirely. Apparently her husband had taken a job in another state, and they sold the house in under 2 weeks. Carol said the new owners were quiet, polite, and had already introduced themselves to half the block. I said that was the best possible outcome. Carol agreed. The fence held through the next 2 storm systems without any issues. The posts were solid, the panels were level, the property line was exactly where it should be. I kept the orange reflective marker Angela had planted at my curb. I moved it to my garage shelf as a reminder that documentation beats intimidation every single time. A year later, I got a call from Eric. He said another HOA in the area had hired him to clean up a similar mess, and he wanted to use my case as an example in his training materials. I said yes, as long as he changed the names and the address. He laughed and said no one would believe it was real anyway. I told him to include the part about the survey stake. He said that was the part he was leading with. The Ridgeview Estates Fence Compliance Association is still operating, but it is a different organization now. The new board meets monthly, posts agendas in advance, and actually listens to homeowners. Enforcement actions are rare, documented, and fair. The neighborhood email list is used for community events, not public shaming. People talk to each other without fear. It took a lawsuit threat, an insurance scare, and a video recording to get there. But it worked. I still see Greg around the neighborhood. He waves. I wave back. We do not talk about Angela anymore. There is no need. The rules are clear. The process is fair. The board is accountable. That is all anyone wanted. The fence is still standing. The property line is exactly where it should be. Angela is gone. The board follows its own rules. And I have not received a single violation notice since the hearing. That is the win. Not the settlement check, not the apology letter, not the policy changes. The win is that I can fix a fence panel in my own yard without someone planting a fake boundary marker and threatening me with fines. The win is that the next homeowner will not have to fight the same fight. The win is that the HOA learned it cannot manipulate records, move survey stakes, and harass people without consequences. If you ever find yourself in a neighborhood where the HOA secretary is moving your property stakes and sending email blasts to 300 people just to pressure you into compliance, remember this. Document everything. Get a licensed professional. Keep your evidence organized, and do not back down when you know you are right. The video footage, the survey report, and the attorney demand letter were the three things that forced the board to act. Without them, Angela would still be running enforcement, and I would still be fighting over a fence panel. The orange reflective marker is still on my garage shelf. I look at it sometimes and remember that morning when Angela planted it at my curb like I was the problem. I was not the problem. The problem was a board secretary who thought she could rewrite property lines and intimidate anyone who questioned her. The problem was a system with no oversight and no accountability. The problem was fixed. Until the next HOA story, take care, and I will see you soon.